What I'd like to do now is introduce you briefly to Ian Barton. So, Ian, if you can come up. Ian is the MD for Imperial Health Sciences. They're a South African-based organisation, and over the past few years, Imperial have expanded their services across the continent of Africa. With facilities in Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, Malawi, to mention a few. So I think it's going to be really interesting to hear from Ian about how they've been managing their resources within Imperial. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, and hopefully we'll have a bit of fun as we go along. It's actually really nice to get this big screen down here because it means I can present without my specs on. I've also been audacious enough to try and include in here a little bit of a sort of built-in tutorial on presentation style and structure, because I think what happens often in these things, you're given a 12-minute slot, how the hell do you get a message across? And the very basic part of it is keep it simple, keep it concise, keep it believable, and make it something that people enjoy. And so the structure is going to be tell them what you're going to tell them, then tell them, and then tell them what you told them. And that's your introduction, middle bit, and ending. It's as simple as that. So tell it. I knew you wasn't going to be as gentle on me. So the tell them what you're going to tell them is simple. What are we going to do about talent development and talent retention? It's get them, grow them, and excite them. And if all you remember is those three, that's enough for me. Get them, grow them, and excite them. And I say excite them, not retention. Don't retain them. Make them want to stay. Because in that way, you know you've actually got the success. The get them is interesting. And we use some pretty off-the-wall ideas and some very, very different approaches that some people don't think is intuitive. Carry some baggage. Don't try and run your organization as lean as you can, because if you don't have some extra talent lying around, you're not going to be able to take on the next big thing. You're not going to be able to climb the next mountain. You're not going to be able to replace the individual that you lose unexpectedly. So you've actually got to do this consciously. You can't be looking at an organogram and saying, oh, I need a person. You've actually got to be looking for talent actively. And part of that is the next thing that I say to my staff all the time. If you find somebody that's got the smarts, they've got the passion, they've got the work ethic, and most importantly, they've got common sense, employ the bugger now. Get him on the payroll and we'll figure it out later. Because if you don't go and grab those opportunities when they present themselves to you, you're never going to build a talent pool that's sustainable for your organization. And then throw things at them and throw them at things. Deploy them into silly projects and silly places and see whether they work, see whether it works out for them. So it's so much easier to take someone that you've built a bit of a relationship with over time, doing something really hard in a weird and out-of-the-way place, and put them into a well-structured job because you've built up that trust and respect, than it is to go and try and pull somebody in and stick them into a highly critical role right up front. But then there's some specific things that we do as well, and one of them is this concept of scholarships, where we go out and we do pay money for people to go to university. Now, it's actually quite hard at the moment in South Africa, because if you don't pay 100,000 Rand a year for a scholarship for a pharmacist, they'll go find somebody else, because they're in such short supply that you've really got to pay residence, tuition, books, and pocket money before you can actually get somebody. It's not as easy as it used to be. But we do that. And then the second thing is sponsoring people to go to things. So getting people to go to conferences, getting people to go on trips, getting people to go and try things out, and seeing how well they react in that environment, and seeing how well they perform in that space. Internships are a very important part of what we do as well, and we have this program of graduates where we bring in about 12 per year, we stick them into the business, we run them through a rotation program, and about 50% of them land up staying. And that way we actually get a chance to actually get a good feel for who these people are. And so the suck it and see approach is really, it's a fundamental part of what you got to do. You got to accept that there are going to be some frogs in there that you're going to kiss, and they ain't going to turn into princes, but you got to get on with it and do it, because if you don't, you will not build that talent pool. And then lastly, in terms of the get them ideas, don't forget to look at the obvious. Very often the talent in your organization is right under your nose. And in fact, you haven't just seen it because you haven't taken the time to look. And part of that is about not just going around managing your business trying to catch people doing things wrong. It's going out actively looking for the people who are doing things right. And that's often for people who are in management, that's not an innate skill. They're brought up to learn that you've got to go and look for the bad guys and weed them out. You've also got to go and actively look for the good guys and bring them up. But then the last point there, which was actually the second last point on the slide, but that doesn't matter, is this concept of the world in which we operate. Now, South Africa is far worse than anywhere else, but across the continent it still exists. There is this differential between economics and intellect. Now, in South Africa, the specific is that as a result of the previous system, you could have really bright people with really, really capable minds and capable work ethic and capable common sense, but because of the system, they were not exposed to education. So don't confuse educational status with ability, and go looking across your workforce for the people that will be your next generation of talent. And then grow them, the how to build them up. And really, I try and drive this message into my management team continuously that says, don't just look at the skills for the person doing the job. Look at the skills of the person. And there's this concept of developing a competence, which is developing the ability to do the job that is in front of you. And then there's this concept of developing the potential of the person, actually creating the substance of that individual. And that's not about learning SOPs. That's not about learning software systems. That's about getting them into debates, getting them into forums, shoving them in front of clients, making them get up and speak at conferences, and coaching them through those exercises to where they become great. And before we get on to the process of KPI management, just a quick thing about the process of development and appraisal of people. When you find someone in a job and they're doing really, really badly, it's either because they're bad, or because they don't know how to do the job, or because, in fact, they're bored out of their cotton-picking mind. And don't forget that third one. Don't forget that third one, because that's the one where you lose great people because you didn't realize their potential was far greater than the competence of the task that you're sticking in front of them right now. And as a result, they're suffering from boredom and therefore performing poorly. So take the time to understand the root cause of poor performance, not just to evaluate performance and base your decision on a score. KPIs, people always talk about KPIs and talk about what this thing is in terms of performance management, and it really interests me that we spend all this time coming up with things to measure. I want to give you a couple of thoughts on it. The first is, if it doesn't increase my revenue, or it doesn't decrease my cost, or it doesn't make my client happier, don't measure it. Okay? Because those are the only three things that matter. Does it increase my revenue? Does it reduce my costs? Or does it make my customer happy? And if you can't show me how it affects one of those three things, do not tell me you are wasting your time measuring it. It's not as simple as that. There are a couple of other things that I do allow them to creep in now and then, and that's those things like driving strategic deliverables. So have we got something that we're pushing forward in order to change the business, and we're putting in milestones of measurability of deliverable so that we can move the business forward? And then the other is the concept of the early warning system. So you're not necessarily waiting for the tsunami to hit the beach. You actually want to get the alarm when the earthquake happens 20 miles offshore. And that can also be something that you're measuring, which is not directly attributable to one of the big three. But don't go measuring a whole pile of stuff that actually doesn't move the needle. And there's a great guy, he's one of the Formula One owners that started one of the Formula One businesses, who said this thing, does it make the car go faster? You could bring him any idea under the sun, and he only ever asked you one question. Does it make the car go faster? Because if it doesn't make the car go faster, why are you bothering to measure it and manage it? And so that last line there is very, very important. Do not spend your life measuring the things you cannot manage, and definitely don't spend your time measuring the stuff that you have no intention of managing at all. And then the last thing, excite them. Now, part of exciting is you've got to have a mojo. You've got to have a thing that makes people believe that it's a great place to work. It's not about trying to tie them in. It's not about getting them to sign contracts. It's about getting the place to a vibe that nobody ever wants to leave. And so one of the things that we drive within our business is this concept of the ordinary heroes, where we say to our staff that what they do matters. What they do actually makes a difference, because when they're actually the guy who's checking the inventory in at receiving, if they don't do that right, eventually there is a patient who's going to live the consequence of that. And so we run this campaign of REAP, the respect, the execution, appreciation, and pride, in order to drive those values into the minds of the people who work in our business. Now, interestingly, it's respect, execution, appreciation, and pride. Now, you remember it when it used to be 5 values. And I could never get the staff to remember the 5 values. So I went and did a whole bunch of research on this. And what it turns out is if you tell somebody 3 things, 90% of them retain it. If you tell them 4 things, 85% retain it. If you try to get them to remember 5, it drops down to like half. So you've got to keep your messaging simple and logical. We also do other stuff. Our Thought Leadership Awards is something that we're very proud of. We go looking for the people, and we encourage the people who get out there and try different things and try and change the way in which the business works. And then we also do some great stuff in terms of the way we project the business in terms of its corporate citizenry and its status within the community. And the Unjani Clinic project that we've launched and that we've funded as an organization to now where we've got money for over 100 clinics is certainly one that gives our people a vibe about who we are. And then finally, another initiative we have is the way in which we look after our people, because there is no question, if you have an unwell workforce, how can you expect them to deliver against your expectations? And it fascinates me to see how we have organizations who are in the business of delivering healthcare products and managing HIV in the community, and yet don't actually see their own staff as part of that task. So that's pretty much it. Tell them what you told them. Get them, grow them, and excite them. Have a plan, have a model, have things you do. Don't think it's going to happen by accident, and get out there and change your business.